weekend. I hope you have love in your life. I have love in my life, and I'm grateful for it every day. I know what it's like to be without love, and I didn't like it. So I'm going to see some of my siblings today. And if you don't think birth order and siblings matter, you aren't paying attention. In Your Brain is Always Listening, coming out in a couple weeks, March 2nd, with a new public television special I did with my wife, Tana. I talk about all the influences. You know, what is your brain always listening to? And one of the things it's always listening to is birth order. And it's always listening to your siblings and how much they loved you, how much they hated you, how much they beat you up or belittled you, humiliated you. And I figured out, I think it was Christmas before last, why the holidays are so hard. My older sister, Chris, was telling a story about me when I was a teenager, but I think she told it for the 50th time. And I remember leaving and telling Tana, this is why the holidays are stressful, because you can never get away from your past. They're always in the present. Now, I know some of you, like me, come from big families. I'm one of 7. I'm third, which means completely not special. But as we're going to see, today we're going to talk about the science of birth orders. So in the book, I have these very cool dragons. And these are the sibling and birth order dragons. All of us have, you know, this is part of the second part of the book on the they, them, and other dragons. And your dragons are always fighting with the other people's dragons that are in your life. And so the oldest will have a different set of dragons generally from the middle kids or the younger kids. And they create battles. And this is why relationships are messy, especially between brothers and sisters. So all of the videos, my dad took a lot of home movies when we were young. And in virtually all of them, I'm getting beaten up by my older brother. And I remember this. I was not happy about this. And I was like 50, and Dad was, you know, because he would do that. We'd go over his house, be like, hey, watch this. And I'm like, he's beating me up again. I'm like, why didn't you stop that? And what he said was, somebody had to take the movies, which I thought completely was lame. I was not happy with his answer. So your brain is always listening to the voices of your siblings. They were often competing with you for your parents' attention. They know almost all of your embarrassing childhood stories. They bring them up at the worst times. Like when you bring a new girlfriend over, although this was also my grandmother. I don't have a grandmother dragon. I should get a grandmother dragon. When she met Tana, shortly, I guess, before she died, she looked at her and she said, oh, you are Danny's next victim. My grandmother. I told her, I said, Grandma, after you're dead, I'm going to talk bad about you. So now I was not innocent at all. I had a pet raccoon when I was 16. Yes. Her name, I didn't know it was a she at the time. Her name was Hermie, and I just loved her. But she was devious. And one day I was looking for Hermie, and I walked into my two younger sisters' room. They shared a room. And Renee had an aquarium, and she had fish swimming around the aquarium. And Hermie, the raccoon, is on her tippy toes with her paw in the aquarium fishing, trying to get the fish. And I like scooted her out and didn't think about it again until 4 days later. I heard this blood curdling scream. And Renee goes, "The fish are gone." I found Hermie. She had this sly look on her face, and I knew her days were numbered. So I am not innocent in all of this. So what does the science say? Birth order really does matter. Are you the firstborn? Special. Are you the firstborn of a specific gender? Special. A child whose next closest siblings is 5 or more years older, because then you go back to being a first child. I think that's why my first 3 kids, they were all 5 years apart. I wanted to make sure, actually, I didn't know this at all at the time. But the oldest child gets 3,000 more hours of attention from their parents. So they tend to walk earlier, they tend to talk earlier, and at least early on, they have higher IQs. In larger families, the oldest kids typically have more responsibility at home. It's clearly true of my older sister. Babysitting duties, chores, this can increase their sense of confidence, can also fuel the responsible dragons. They start at higher paying jobs, older children do, although their younger siblings tend to catch up over time. Firstborns often fill positions of authority. Did you know that 24 of 45 US presidents were firstborn? By far the highest percentage. 21, get this, 21 of the first 23 astronauts who went to space were the oldest in their family. Now, on the downside for the oldest, they are more likely to have narcissistic traits, and they're the worst drivers of them all. Are you a middle child? I am. Actually, in my family, there's 5 middle children. You probably have the fewest pictures in the family photo albums. I noticed that. My dad died last year, and I went through, it's got to be 10,000 photos. And not that many of me. Middle children tend to be mediators, think psychiatrists. They tend to be loyal. They're generally more open to compromise, often at their own expense. They often avoid conflict. For so many years, I hated conflict because they get beaten up by their older siblings. They are often unspoiled, thank you. So very few special spoiled or entitled dragons. They to be less frustrated by the demands of life because, let's fix something here. They tend to be less frustrated by the demands of life because their life was often frustrating. I lived in the Mojave Desert for 2 years and was perfectly happy. I was a chief psychiatrist. It was the time I was in the Army. Uh, and I was the chief psychiatrist out at Fort Irwin, and people go, "How can you live in Barstow?" And I'm like, "It's beautiful. You should see the stars at night. It's like you can almost reach up and touch them." Yes, many days, very hot, but thank God we have air conditioning. So, less frustrated by the demands of life. They tend to have fewer emotional problems and are less likely to be diagnosed with ADD, but they're more likely to be mavericks. They're more likely to push against authority. And growing up, my dad called me a maverick, and to him, that was not a good thing. I think I've done that in my profession over the years. And what's interesting was my dad was considered a maverick in his industry. He was a grocer, and he was also a middle child. Um, so middle children tend to push against authority. They leave home early. I left at 17. The apparent disadvantages of middle children may actually help them be more empathic and independent. Or are you a youngest child? They tend to be charming and social, but they can also blame others. And my youngest, before I was with 10 and we had Chloe. Chloe was 2 when 10 and I met. Caitlin, this so fits her. Charming, sweet, and blamed her brother for everything bad that happened. And I used to remember her phrase was Dee Dee did it. So Dee Dee was her name for her older brother, Anthony. And one day she spilled her milk at the table. And she said, Dee Dee did it. And I'm like, Dee Dee's not home. He's spending the night at a friend's house. She said, no. Dee Dee came home, spilled the milk, and then he left. They tend to blame others. Youngest children view their older siblings as bigger, faster, stronger, and smarter. They may attempt to differentiate themselves by being more rebellious. They typically have the least limits. So I'm one of 7. By the time my parents got to me, they didn't care. I'm 3rd. So you can imagine by my youngest sister, the 7th one, the caboose, she didn't have very many limits at all. They typically take more risks, and they have more bad habit dragons. If both spouses are 2 youngest children, they're more likely to go into debt. Later born children have a higher incidence of drug and alcohol treatment. So they have a higher incidence of the addicted dragons, which we're going to talk about. So, are you an only child? My wife is an only child. Well, these kids are really interesting because they can be similar to both firstborn and the youngest child. So they're clearly special. More often, they are special, spoiled, and entitled dragons. They're more ambitious than any of the other group if they're from a middle-class family. Only children are more likely to be academically successful. They get a lot of attention, happier, more flexible and creative, but they are also perceived by others to be more self-centered. They might, only children have a higher incidence of obesity. It's interesting, soothing themselves with food. So what happens when a sibling or birth order dragons are triggered? Well, if you're firstborn, you may feel a sense of responsibility towards others. If you're a middle child, you may rebel against authority. People would say that fits my life. If you're the youngest, you may use charm to get your way. If you're an only child, you may think first about yourself. So, in the book, I talk about how these dragons are triggered, the they, them, and other dragons, and what do you need to listen to or leave behind. So, one, take responsibility for your own life. And don't do too much for others, otherwise, you will breed contempt. I know that's a harsh statement. We want to teach people to be responsible for themselves. If you're a middle child, innovate, but don't denigrate others in the process. For youngest children, back up your charm with smarts and hard work. And if you're an only child, work to be inclusive and think more about others. So I hope you find this helpful. I had a really fun interaction with one of my patients yesterday who took the Know Your Dragons quiz. So if you go to knowyourdragons.com, take the quiz. I'll put the link below the video. Knowyourdragons.com. So she took it and she got the angry dragon. And she had one of her coworkers take it who got the shouldn't shaming dragon. And then they talked about how their dragons would trigger each other. And that's sort of the whole point of the they, them, and other dragons. So take the Know Your Dragons quiz, knowyourdragons.com, and you only have a few weeks left. If you pre-order the book, I have 4 free gifts for you. I have a playbook that summarizes the major principles in the book. You know, people just aren't reading as much because their attention spans are shorter than they used to be. But I want you to get this information. There's an audio program you can download for free called Magnificent Mind with Medical Hypnosis. One of my most popular programs ever, hypnosis, that I do for you. Anxiety, sleep, pain, smoking, weight, peak performance. So if you've ever wanted to be hypnotized, pre-order the book, download it. You also get access to a free event with me March 17th for 2 hours. I'm going to answer questions, but just from people who pre-ordered the book. And my favorite gift of all is a coupon for a free bottle of Happy Saffron, which is, it's my favorite supplement. It's just the one I make sure I take every day. It has saffron, zinc, and curcumins, 21 randomized controlled trials that it supports your mood and helps with memory. It's been shown to help with focus and weight and PMS. I'm just a huge fan of saffron. We'll give you a free bottle. It's a $49.95 value just if you pre-order the book. So you can learn all about the offer at yourbrainisAlwaysListening.com. I got the second dose of the vaccine today. We'll see how I feel tomorrow. I know it caused quite a dragon stir when Tana and I talked about it. But hoping I feel well. If I am, I will see you tomorrow. If not, we're going to do Valentine's Day together for sure. I think I'm going to talk about the former, current, and prospective lover dragons. So perfect for Valentine's Day, and I'll try and get Tana to be on with me. All right, everybody, take care.